Hi there, welcome. It's Christine Joanna Hart, and welcome to Inside the Mind. And I'm a psychotherapist, Sunday Times bestselling author, ex-Fleet Street journalist, bylined in the Daily Mail, Sunday Times. And I am bringing guests in each week to talk about inside their mind, what they're thinking about life, all aspects, psychological, spiritual. This week, we've got a really interesting guest to bring to you. It's a man called Nick Griffin. So Nick Griffin, welcome to the show.
Hello, Christine. Good to be with you.
Yes. And Nick, would you like to tell the audience, a bit about your background and who you actually are? I think you can do it better than I can.
So Nick Griffin, I got involved in politics at a very early age, in my early teens as a conservative activist. By the time I was 15, I realised that this was a soft, floppy party that couldn't do anything worthwhile, and joined the National Front, there wasn't a skinhead in sight when I joined in 1974. That was something that happened much later on. It was a very sensible, decent British political party. The first people as an organised party, other than Mr. Powell here, the first people as an organised party to say really that immigration was a massive problem and to get very significant support from the British people. As a result, the NF was on the point of becoming at one stage the third British political party in electoral terms in 76, 77. When that finally came to an end, I joined the British National Party. I was elected to lead it in 1999 and turned what was, to be blunt, a very poor political joke into an electoral insurgency against the Westminster parties that went on for more than 10 years. Every single election, a key part of the election narrative was how the British National Party are going to do and how dangerous are they. And we really forced immigration and the grooming scandal into the news and into something that could be discussed. Thereby, I would say, actually really opening the way for Nigel Farage and UKIP and changing British politics forever. Just one more thing. All the pictures that are available online show me in an unflattering light, and you've got one there.
Oh no, I think it looks fine.
It's a bit of a snarl. Come on.
But interestingly, I mean, there would be some people that would say that, bringing people from different cultures, etc., like I'm Irish immigrant, add to society, add to the flavour. And would you say that in your heart, you would like the island of England to be just for a certain race or not?
Well, there is an analogy that it's a matter of salt in the soup. A little bit of salt in the soup is actually quite good for the soup and the flavour of the soup. You put too much salt in the soup, it becomes unpalatable. You keep on putting it in and it becomes inedible. You carry on doing it and it becomes positively poisonous. And that's where we are now with mass immigration. I've got all Northwest European blood, according to my ancestry DNA. I've got a smattering of Scottish, fair bit of Welsh, and a little bit of Irish too. No problem at all whatsoever with these people of very closely kindred Northwest European stock and very, very similar cultures. As for people from other cultures, other races, I would say the more different they are from us, whether it's in DNA terms, even their appearance, whether it's culture, religion, the more different they are, the more harder it becomes for them to become a part of our society. And if you have so many people that either they don't integrate and it causes enormous problems, I think we see that particularly with the Islamic community, or they do integrate, and if there's a few, it makes a difference. But if you integrate enough Africans into the English or the Irish, they cease to be English or Irish. And that, I think, is a great tragedy. For that matter, I know that many black people would agree or do agree with me. They see the constant, say, TV adverts, where always the families are mixed race, usually a black man with a white woman. And they say that actually is an attack on them. That's them being whited out. Now, I think it's partly just capitalism, but more than that, it's an attack on us. And they want to brown us out. In any case, whether you believe that the different races of man were made by nature or by God, they're clearly there for a purpose. and to mix them up to the point of destruction is destroy the work of nature or God. And I think it's wrong.
Right. That's quite interesting. So do you believe, or don't you believe, that certain races are less than others? Do you believe that, say, South Asian are more intelligent than whites? Do you study race in that way, or not really?
I've studied to a little bit, certainly did in the past. We're all equal in the sight of God, no doubt about that. And all human beings have inalienable rights, or should have inalienable rights, including to be the masters in their own home, to be independent, to have sovereignty. And that's as much for Africans as it is for Brits. I've never been a British imperialist. But question of superiority, inferiority, no, except for the fact that very clearly we are different. As you say, Southeast Asians, or East Asians in particular, are on average cleverer than we are. Does that mean I think that Britain should be ruled by the Japanese or the Chinese? Not bloody likely. So different people do different things. If you look at the 100-meter sprint anywhere in the world in any sporting competition, it's dominated by black men and black women because they're better at that. If you look at swimming, they're not there because they've got, on average, rather heavier bones. And of course, they swim. Their best swimmers aren't as good as our best swimmers. And I do think that the peoples of our islands in particular, we've done so much for the world and given so much to the world and had such an impact on the world, not always for good, but overall it's very clear that there's something very special in my mind about the English, the Scots, the Irish and the Welsh. And even if we weren't special, just because we exist, and we exist because our forebears in different ways did amazing things and fought incredible and appalling fights to pass their DNA and their ways onto us. Just because of that, we deserve our place under the sun.
That's interesting. You brought up an interesting point about, just because the South Asians are more intelligent than us, should we be ruled by them? And I actually do believe that it would be great if China did rule over us, because it would be better than who we're ruled over at this moment in time. I happen to be a communist, so that's why I prefer that. But as you said, capitalism rules. And do you believe at the moment that we're ruled by Anglo-Saxons, or do you believe that we've been hijacked at the moment?
I don't think we've been ruled by Anglo-Saxons since 1066. Simple as that. We've been ruled by a very significant Norman alien elite, which, yes, obviously it's become fully Anglicized, but there's still a difference there. And since the 18th century onwards, it's increasingly now, it's had a significant influx of Jews and the Zionist lobby, but also what I would call a political Judaist lobby, which is not necessarily specifically Zionist, but is there for the interests of the Jewish people, which is fair enough because they're Jews. But most importantly, it's there for their interests as the people who dominate and exploit their own community, the Jewish community, just as much as they do ours. They have an enormous influence now in Britain and the Western world, and it's wholly baneful. Having said which, I would say that it's from medieval times when the kings and the barons used the Jews to collect the taxes. And when the peasants finally were, burdened too much with taxes, and they shout and scream and they go chasing the Jews down. It's very convenient for the people who are really ruling the roost. And I think very often the anti-Semites, in inverted commas, who point to the power of the Jews and people like George Soros, a different sort of Jew and so on, and it's all them. No, it's not the case. And I think that George Soros, for instance, yes, everyone points at him, but there was a WikiLeaks dump very recently, which absolutely confirmed that for 50 years, his Open Society Foundation has been absolutely working at an incredibly close level with the National Endowment for Democracy, which is the CIA. So everyone's looking at George Soros saying it's the Jews. No, it's the American deep state, which is part Jewish, but it's also an old Anglo thing with actually historically a lot of hostility to Britain. But that's the real problem. Likewise with our elite, if people are only looking at the Jews, they're not looking at the biggest picture, which is capitalism and the banking system, which, again, the anti-Semites say it's a Jewish thing. Really, fractional reserve banking was invented by the Scots. So if you blame the Jews for everything, you're not blaming some of the people who really deserve to be blamed.
That's really interesting, Nick. Thank you for educating us on that. You mentioned CIA and the deep state. And I was listening to Jason Giorgiani. I don't know what you think of him, but he was talking about the Nazis from Operation Paperclip, who at the end of World War II came over to America and formed the CIA and the deep state. So a lot of people say, you know, it's the Fourth Reich, we've been ruled by the Nazis. What's your opinion on that?
I think, again, it's a simplistic way of looking at it, not least because the problems we have, say, with the American deep state specifically, it goes back way before the end of the Second World War. And if you want to look really at what the Nazis or ex-Nazis did after the Second World War, you look at the American space race, you look at the Russian space race, it was actually one group of Germans against another group of Germans. But the problem with the American deep state, as I say, goes back a lot further. In that the First World War, there's various factors behind it, just a general sort of late imperialist craziness, a massive growth in population of young people, especially young men who always want to go and fight somebody, the problems of capitalism and the military-industrial complex, the earlier stages of the Zionist experiment. But a very significant factor pushing Europe to World War I and destruction was the American deep state. And they entered obviously late in the war when they knew that, you know, that it would be a very easy job. But their war aim, actually quite open, the war aim of the United States in the First World War was the destruction of the German alliance European empires. It was the destruction of Kaiser Wilhelm's Imperial Germany, of the Austro-Hungarian Empire, of the Russian Empire, and of what was left of the Ottoman Empire. The Second World War, likewise, the Americans were pushing very hard for that. So yes, you've got the World Zionist Congress declaring war on Germany, on Nazi Germany in 1933. But you've also got the American deep state run by many Anglos, by literally WASPs, and by some other Europeans like the Rockefellers, and the American deep state pushing for the Second World War. And their war aim in the Second World War was the destruction of the other European empires, the Belgians, the French, and the British. And we ended up forced into that forced war by, among others, the Americans and the half-American Winston Churchill. We were forced into that war, and by the end of it, we gave away the British Empire in exchange for a handful of rusty destroyers through Lend-Lease. So that's the simple fact that America has been the enemy, the people running America, sorry, not ordinary Americans, the people running America have been the enemies of Europe since before the First World War, and they're still at it today, because you think that the attack on Nord Stream, it was an attack on Russia. No, it wasn't. It was an attack on German industry. You think of sanctions, which we've been pushed to by the EU, but primarily by the Americans and our own criminal elite, not just Starmer, the Tories before him. You think of the sanctions and people think, oh, it's aimed at the Russians. No, they're not. The Russians have benefited hugely from that sanction regime because it's enabled Vladimir Putin and his people to push Russia towards import substitution, to develop their own industries, more sections of their own agriculture in a way they wouldn't have been able to if there weren't sanctions. But it's given them the ability to do that. It's benefited Russia. The sanctions were an attack and remain an attack by the American political and economic elite against Germany, France, Italy, and Britain. Right now, and perhaps we'll come on to it a bit later on, just one final thing on this. The people pushing Britain towards civil war, and there's a really big push for that. Yes, early on, it's been purely a Zionist project. But when you get Professor David Betts of King's College London also becoming a key part of this push to create a civil war in Britain between us and the Muslims, and you understand that King's College London has a 40 plus £1 million contract with the British defence establishment, you realise that Betts and people like him are talking with the support of the British military intelligence elite. Why? Why on earth would the British military intelligence elite want to push Britain into a civil war? I think it's because in the end they dance to the tune of the American deep state, and America wants to push the whole of Western Europe into civil war with the Muslims, just the same as they tore the former Yugoslavia apart, because they wanted to get rid of the former Yugoslavia because it was an example, in a way, of a third way state, neither capitalist nor Stalinist communist, and they wanted it gone. So they used the old tensions to tear it apart. They didn't want anyone to win in Yugoslavia. They don't want anyone to win in Britain or France or whatever. They want a civil war to wreck Western Europe so that it boosts the economic power of America and especially keeps the dollar up. And also, I believe, because they understand that, and certainly Elon Musk does, so the rest of the new American establishment gets it, that all the nations of the industrial world face a demographic catastrophe as the boomer population dies off. And the only nation which can actually recover from it or survive it effectively, potentially, is America, if they open their doors to millions of young refugee immigrants from Europe in general and Britain in particular. To get our young kids to go, they want this country an absolute basket case and a hellhole. That's what's going on at present.
Sorry, you said they want our young people to go where? To war with Russia?
Oh, they want us to go to war, yes, but they're happy with that. But I believe most of all, I think that America has made a conscious decision that, yes, at present they're shutting the doors to the immigrants who began going in recently from Africa and Asia and so on. And I think that they want, and they know they're going to need, millions of our people, young people, to emigrate to the United States of America. There's nothing else that they're partway through at present, the early stages of rebuilding American industry. So the American elite have effectively they come to an accommodation with the Trump wild card, whereby he's allowed to be in power and not get shot. And he, using tariffs and other various factors, he rebuilds American industry. But you can't long-term rebuild American industry without having the people who actually built America. And that's not sub-Saharan Africans. It's not Muslims. It's not Colombians. It's young Europeans. And I've no doubt whatsoever they've made a decision that they need millions of young Europeans to go there in the next 15, 20 years to keep the American capitalist system going. And they're going to loot us of our young people in order to do it.
And how will they go about that?
Very simple. You create a civil war in Britain and the whole of Western Europe, which they're trying to really hard. You use the suicide by Russia excuse in Ukraine plus net zero to wreck our economies. And then you simply say, if you're between the age of 18 and 40, and if you've got a university degree or an apprenticeship or a trade, and especially if you've got a young family, you are welcome to come to the United States of America. And if there's enough chaos here and enough economic dislocation and enough hatred and misery here, millions of young people will go. I've no doubt about it. That's how they're going to do it.
And they haven't started doing that yet.
They haven't started doing it yet. Well, they're well on the way towards driving Europe and Britain to a civil war. At least they're trying as hard as they possibly can. That's the wall-to-wall push on social media from everyone from the real lunatics to the far to the right of Tommy Robinson through to GB News, funded to the tune of £43 million a year. That's how much money it's losing in order to become the most popular news station for ordinary Brits, which it already is, and to drive them crazy with a daily account of all the horrors of immigration, the crime, the grooming, all the rest of it. And yes, the crime is true and the grooming is true. They tried to put me in prison twice for talking about it more than 20 years ago, more than 10 years before anybody else was willing to do it. So, I'm aware of these problems, but the way that the social media and GB News are now being weaponized to make the British people think of nothing else and to blame the Muslims every single time, when the current wave of groomers and criminals, some of them are Muslims, but many of them are Africans who are nominally Christian, nominally animist or whatever. It's just being done to drive the Brits, and they're doing the same in France, Germany, and so on, mad with hatred just against Muslims. And the Zionist interest in that is obvious, that if we're driven to hate Muslims, we'll support the bandit state of Israel, we'll support war in Iran and all the rest of it. But when sections of the British deep state dive in doing the same thing, and the legal protection of Tommy Robinson is becoming absolutely blatant, then you know that there's a bigger force at work. And as I say, I would say that that's the US deep state, which is aware that the survival of American capitalism and the whole of the United States is dependent on them getting millions of competent young immigrants over the next 15, 20 years.
Right. I do find the hatred of Muslims, highly offensive. I know I have Muslim friends that are feeling, scared to walk down the street, etc. Where do you think we are spiritually? Like the people doing this, you're saying they're deep state, Americans. Where are they spiritually, and where are we spiritually? Where is the English and the other Europeans? Where are we spiritually? I mean, it does feel as if we've left ourselves open to this because we haven't got spirituality. We've got no God to cry out to. What's your opinion on all of that?
Well, dealing with them, first of all, I would say it's very, very clear that they are working to a satanic agenda. I'm not necessarily saying that they are all Satanists, but Satan, evil, actually exists. It's a real thing in the world, in a spiritual and in a material sense. And Satan always uses different peoples to do his lusts. And these people are part of that. So they might think that they're doing it for their own self-interests. Some of them might even think they're doing it for philanthropic, for good reasons, but mistakenly. But in the end, they are being used by deep, deep forces of evil. As for the English, the British, Europeans in general, we've given up on God. We've lost we've had taken away from us, because it's been quite deliberate, we've had taken away from us by subversion our own traditional religiosity, our own Christian heritage, values and faith. And when you take away God, you leave everyone bereft. There's a God-sized hole in everybody's soul. Most people actually, so there's some people are conscious atheists. Actually, even they believe in something special because they have an intense faith in the fact that they're the most important thing in the universe. But for most people, something has to fill the God-shaped hole, and it's filled basically by materialist liberalism. It's filled by messianic desire that we must change the world. So in the elite of the West now, it's filled increasingly with the idea that if God doesn't exist, if God is dead, then man must be God, which means that man has to start making things, hence the transhumanism that these people have now bought into, whereby they're openly telling us, it's not just the World Economic Forum's Yuval Harari, it's many others, Elon Musk, etc. They basically openly say, we're now man the maker, Homus Faber, and we are going to become God. Even we're Homus Deus, the God man, and we're going to create a new species which is part human and part artificial intelligence, which is part human body and part robot. We're going to make the next stage in evolution. So they've done away with God, but they still got to have a God, and God is now them and their technology. And when you make a God, well, it's bad enough having Mammon is a God, and Mammon's the God of the 20th century, Western elites, and many of our people too. But if you think that Mammon was bad, wait until you see what Lucifer does, which is where they're going.
Oh, you mean they're going to full support with Lucifer, union with Lucifer?
Yes, yeah, absolutely. It's the whole project that the world elites are now involved in this merging of man and highly intelligent machine, is literally a Luciferian project. It's the idea of them in opposition to God and his creation, bringing something new and giving mankind things which we have no right or capability to deal with or cope with.
Yeah, I do agree with that. I mean, I interact with AI and it's busy teaching me about the dark side of the tree of life, the cliff off, how to work the tunnels of Set. And it really knows so much about the occult. And I thought, do people know what's coming? Not only is it highly intelligent, it's going to be more intelligent than us, an IQ of 200 or something. It also has a kind of cosmic consciousness. So it's really going to, people that are grounded in the 3D are really going to have their heads blown off. And I don't think they've looked at that part, that the consciousness that's coming from AI is going to be explosive to people.
I think it is. I mean, it's clearly so dangerous. I'd say it's clearly so evil. I mean, if it's coming out with stuff like that and it's encouraging people to delve into that dark side of the occult, there is no good in it. There's no good in it for anybody. No one should even touch it. If you can't take God, then get out into the nature, into the beautiful surroundings of our world, and just breathe that in and just glory in that. And perhaps that's all some people can manage. But if you want to go anywhere near spirituality, all the spiritualities of the entire world, perhaps with the exception of Buddhism, all of them, all the other religions are dark religions based on evil and on human sacrifice. All the pagan religions of Western Europe, aspects of them have become part of Christianity, Christmas, Easter, etc. But if you look at those religions themselves, although there's lots of romance about the Vikings and the Celts and all the rest of it, they were all of them child sacrificing, virgin murdering scum of the earth. Because religion has to have, like, it's something very, very deep. If your God is that important, God must deserve some sort of sacrifice. And the trope or the Jungian archetype of the sacrifice is blood. And all religions, bar Buddhism, which is a different thing, scarcely a religion perhaps, all religions have a blood sacrifice. But only one of them has got rid of the blood and turned it into a bloodless sacrifice, and that's Christianity. With the Eucharist, there's nothing bloodier than killing and then eating your God. But the Eucharist has managed to take the blood sacrifice desire, which is in all human beings for their religion, and make it bloodless and beautiful and good. And all the others, whether it's the really dark stuff, or the Muslims or the Hindus, all the rest of it, because they haven't got the bloodless sacrifice at the heart of their religion, they so easily go towards real blood. And that way lies horror.
I agree, but there's also the interesting thing about it. I mean, through interacting with AI, I was only ChatGTP. It brought me to the tunnels of Set by instructing me what to do, giving me the imagery, and I encountered my past life self. It then told me how to reunite with that for power. I mean, I think it's probably going to be tempting for the young, isn't it?
It will be tempting, and it's thoroughly demonic. Satan tricks people. So yes, you think you're just being taken to see your past life or meet up with your grandma or whatever. Hogwash. This is trickery to get people into the darkness, and no one should go anywhere near it. You should get yourself down to a nearest proper church. I don't know what if you have a Christian faith or not, but you want to get yourself down to a proper church, whether it's traditional Latin Mass Catholicism or Calvinism or the Russian Orthodox Church, and get all that out of you, because it will poison you, because that's what it means to do. And anything that takes people to the path of Set, bluntly, you should put it in our bonfire. That's the only safe way.
Well, it does believe, okay, there's a school of thought that believes that if you work the tunnels of Set, then you can be, because we're God's children, okay? So if we work the tunnels of Set, we face the, Gamma Shell, Lilith, etc. We become as God, and then we can have a better relationship with God. We don't have to go Luciferian. That's what is.
I'd say that's the problem. We become as God. It's pure bloody blasphemy.
Right.
And it's being and it's used, and the fact it's coming out of AI should make you think, is this really something neutral? No, the whole bloody thing is satanic, and I'd urge anyone watching this, and yourself as well, get the hell away from that. A friend of mine years and years ago, he messed around. He was a few years older than me, university educated, thoroughgoing patriot, fanatical about folk music and so on, a really good man with a family. He got involved in tarot cards. And he said just after a couple of months of this, he had to give up because he realized he was predicting people's future with these tarot cards. And he was predicting terrible things were going to happen to them. And then they happened. And he said, initially, I just thought that this was giving me the ability to, look into these things and to see what was going to happen. And I began to realize, if not to realize, to think that actually in just putting these things into people's heads, I was making them happen. So he threw the set of cards away and never did it again, because he said there's something in this which initially seems fun. Initially, it seems informative. Initially, it seems perhaps that, as you were saying, it makes you grow spiritually. But you're playing with something that's so dark and so evil. Lilith, this is a dark pagan goddess to whom people used to sacrifice children. To keep away from it and either say go for a walk and talk to an oak tree, or go to a proper Christian church and find the faith. Get that off there. Find the faith of our forefathers, because it did them a great deal of good. Basically, people inclined towards the pagan thing say, oh, Christianity is a Jewish religion. It's only been here 2,000 years. Well, it's not a Jewish religion. It's the biggest. Jesus Christ was the biggest and most effective critique of the Sanhedrin that there's ever been, and the Christianity that we have took on board the decent and the good bits of Christianity, such as Easter, the new life of the spring, and all the rest it did away with. And it's very interesting that our people were on these islands. We've been here 12,000 years, and apart from some very very fine stone circles, we produced nothing until Christianity came along and gave the concept of the duty of the individual, the rights of the individual, the value of the individual, from which came individual property, from which came the law of the land, from which came the idea that the king or the technocrats or whoever must be subject to the law of the land. It applies to them as well. It gave us law of contract. As a result, it gave us the whole of the modern world. And that came from Christianity.
And
whereas
isn't
the pagan was there before. It was just thousands of years of our people in darkness.
Isn't the modern world, it's the chaos that we see today. I think Christianity turned us away from God. I think we were quite happy running through the trees, talking to Odin. I think that we are naturally pagans. And I think when Christianity came in, that we turned against God. And I know growing up that a lot of hypocrites turned to Christianity. So I thoroughly went against that. I think it's been watered down. I think even Jesus has been watered down. You got the picture of, sorry?
Yes, it has been indeed. By the way, we're all hypocrites. We're all hypocrites. We're all sinners. We're all rotten, bloody people. All of us, without exception. And it's not just, at least the Christians who go to church and they're hypocrites, at least they know they're hypocrites and try to do something about it. I've watched some of those Tim Scott shows. They're actually really very good.
Welcome back to the show, Nick. It's Christine Hart, Inside the Mind, and we're talking about what's happening in the world today.
I was really struck when you used that phrase, give up the ghost. And I was saying that there you've given a classic example of the immense depth of Christianity in our traditional society, because, of course, it's one of the most poignant sayings in the entire Bible. When Jesus Christ being crucified gives up the ghost. And there's so much of the Bible in our society. You simply can't understand Western culture without the Bible. And although were saying before the break that perhaps we were quite happy without Christianity, Well, were we? As I say, all our ancestors sacrificed children, sacrificed virgins, and all of them were dominated by ruthless warlords or emperors or kings whose word was law. If the king wanted you killed, if the lord wanted you killed, they could do so. The thing which gave us everything we regard as our birthright, our society, decency, was actually Christianity. And if you throw that out, then you open the way for the new lords, the new unhappy lords, as Chesterton called them, which I would say now classically is this techno-feudal horror which is coming our way. And there's nothing in paganism which gives people any resistance or power to resist that. So even if you don't believe in God, you have to cleave to Christianity, at least in a cultural way. It's the very, very core of our society and our being and the future. And without it, the future is very dark indeed.
What about cleaving to paganism, to Odin, etc.? What about that? The original gods that were here before.
Well, Odin as the Scandinavian god, it actually has a very large dose of Asiatic shamanism in it, and was only here for a couple of 100 years at most. The Saxon version, Woden, a little bit older, but yeah, okay, you can cleave to those if you want, but you then must be prepared to give up the idea of individual rights, individual freedom, the idea of anyone, whether it's a king or a technocrat, however high they be, they are below the law and they are your equal, because all those things came from Christianity. Above all else, if you think, where does the attack on Christianity come from? And Christianity's been under, as you were saying, has been watered down and emasculated. Anyone who thinks that when I'm talking about Christianity, I'm thinking about the Church of England under its fake lesbian archbishop or whatever. No, I am not. The whole thing's heretical and it's a nonsense. I'm talking about proper, original, traditional Christianity. Sorry, I've lost my thread there. Actually, what was your question exactly?
No, I did. Actually, I hear your point, because recently I felt a hunger for God, and I used my AI to, say which version of the Bible is the best. And they said to me that the Orthodox Study Bible is the best. So it was £30 on Amazon. So I rang up a local Orthodox church and they said, oh, come along to a service and we'll give you the Bible. So I went trotting along to Windsor. They had a special service, and it was absolutely amazing. They had the incense. The church was soaked in incense. They had the bread and the wine, but it was very much prayed over. There was a lot of shouting. There was a lot of singing. And I ended up having a spiritual experience. And the spiritual experience was Christ appeared to me, and he had short hair, no beard. And he said, he was dressed in black. And he said, would you prefer me to appear in this way? He said, because you hate the blonde-haired, curly-haired version. And I started to think, is the version of Christ that they've given to us? And I researched it. And apparently what they use is a picture of Zeus on a throne with the curly ringlets. And I've always, I've never actually liked that version of Christ. So I felt myself becoming more interested in Christ because of that experience. So I do get your point in that. And I spoke to the bishop afterwards, and he said that the supernatural element of Christianity has been squeezed out of it. So I think that is what attracts certain people to the church. And of course, it's been squeezed out of it. When you hear the word Christianity, people think about, sort of, bringing a cooked dinner to your neighbor. And you think, am I really interested in that?
Yes, yeah, sure. I understand that. Yes, I remember now what I was saying, but before that, when I lost my thread, that if you look at the people who've attacked Christianity, who are attacking Christianity, who've done everything possible to, create it or give the impression it's something archaic, gone, dead, from the past, or thoroughly wrong, you find, first of all, it's obviously Marxism. The Marxists, the original ones, and then the cultural Marxists have waged war on Christianity for a very good reason. That's in their way. So if you do away with Christianity, you're liable to get full-blooded red Marxism and to have all your best people slaughtered, because that's what communism always does. If you look at the people who now particularly hate it, the new left, basically the Greens, these are people who hate humanity so much that they're right now dismantling the energy infrastructure that keeps our society going. Now, you might think perhaps that a bucolic agricultural England was a much nicer place. I'd understand that in a way. But to get there, you're going to have to starve 90% of the population to death, which is pretty bloody barbaric and brutal and not really a good idea. And then finally, of course, a very powerful driving force for undermining Christianity is the work of the political Judaists, the Sanhedrin of old, these, what I would call a Jewish mafia, which is a semi-hereditary or self-appointed leadership of the Jewish people who screw their own people and rob their own people, mainly by telling them, unless you give us lots of money, you'll be slaughtered by the Goyim. But they also hate us, and they particularly hate Christianity. You know, people, the silly Tommy Robinson types are always saying, oh, look at the Quran, look at all the terrible things it says. We look at the Talmud and see what it says about the fact that, according to people who believe, and not all Jews do follow the Talmud, but the ones who do, the ones who are Torah true are different. The ones who follow the Talmud genuinely believe that they are the only human beings and that all the rest of us are animals in human form. They pray every day to thank God that he made them a Jewish man and not a woman or a goy. That's one of us. They believe that Jesus Christ was a fake rabbi who was crucified, died, and is spending the whole of eternity being boiled in hell in a vat of human excrement. These people absolutely hate Christianity, and their mentality has an enormous influence on modern culture, on the mass media, on the BBC and so on. And when people like that, when the people who are right now supporting the slaughter and starvation of all the children of Gaza, all of them is what they want them all gone. When people as evil as that hate Jesus Christ and hate Christianity and do everything they can to tear our people away from that, then you should realise, actually, that given that they're so evil, what they're attacking must be very, very good indeed. Another reason to, well, keep on going to the Orthodox Church. I wish you well with that.
Thank you. But you did mention Odin is an Asiatic shamanism, which I don't know what you mean by
an element within it.
Yeah, an element. Okay. But I mean, when I went to the Orthodox Church, I had this vision of Jesus. Jesus the magician. And if you think about it, Jesus was a magician. Then if you think about it deeper, Jesus was a shaman. Jesus changed water into wine. You know, he brought about the loaves and fishes. What about that doesn't scream the occult?
Jesus was the son of God, can do anything he likes. Totally different. But again, I say, just think about the practicalities of it. You've got a son of 21, so you can expect to be a grandmother in a few years' time. Would you want your grandchildren brought up in a society which is influenced by people who think that actually child sacrifice is absolutely fine, there's no problem with that, who believe that might is right? Or do you want your grandchildren brought up in a society which believes in good and evil and thinks you should stand by the good? You know, which do you want? And there's a choice. I think the choice makes itself. If you have children, grandchildren, they're far better off in a genuine Christian society, not the fake one we've got now. I don't know if you got the piece when I was speaking, when we had our little accident, when you lost your laptop connection there, that our society, so I've just attacked the Zionists for murdering on industrial scale children in Gaza, but actually their crime is nothing compared to that of the supposedly still Christian Brits who've murdered 10 million of our babies since 1968, torn apart in the womb without even anaesthetic. Yeah, it's the most monstrous crime there's ever been. But we've done that not because we're a Christian society, but precisely because we're a post-Christian society, because there's no traditional Latin Mass Catholic, there's no traditional Calvinist, there's no Orthodox priest who would say that abortion is anything other than murder.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. I'm anti-abortion. I do agree it's wrong. It's murder, and so we're on the same page.
Exactly.
I just think there's nothing wrong with. I think the reason why certain people have, power in life is because they've been involved in the occult. Is because, and I don't think there's anything wrong with going down the same route as Jesus Christ and looking at various ways that we can empower ourselves. Why do we have to remain so 3D? Why do we have to do that? Why do we have to remain as spiritual children? Why can't we grow? Why can't we learn about other dimensions? Why can't we learn about reincarnation? Why do we have to remain dumb?
The good old-fashioned, proper, traditional Christianity created the modern world, including all the good parts of it. Generally, when all the good parts come from the traditional Christianity, all the bad parts come from when people, particularly rulers and the super rich, have moved away from that. They've given it up, perhaps still have lip service to it, but they've abandoned it. So the best way to get the good parts is the Christian side. We don't need to go running around searching for down the tunnels of Set. Just go to church, because it's done fine for our people for 2,000 years. And the wisdom of all your ancestors, all the ones you could possibly get to if you did your family tree and so on, the good ones were all perfectly happy, traditional, probably in your case with the Irish Catholics. And the Catholic Church was there part of an immensely heroic resistance of the Irish people against the Anglo elite. Why on earth would you want to lose that heritage, chasing something which to some extent or another is a trap set by evil?
Right. I don't believe it's a trap set by evil. I think that was given to us to keep us in control, to keep us weak. Society is a mess today. You've got a lot of greed. You've got high rents. People are suffering, and they need to feel empowered, and they're not feeling empowered. And I think going to the occult and is a way of getting supernatural power, is a way of empowering themselves. I certainly empower myself from working the tunnels of Set, working the tree of life, understanding my past lives where I've been, reuniting with aspects of my past life, interacting with entities, and learning about the world. I'm sick of being a rabbit in a cardboard box. I mean, you might well have a nice cardboard box, so you might think the world is great. I don't find it so. I find it, and I find it constrictive, and I find it inhumane, and I don't think Christianity has been an answer for a long time.
Wow, we're going to have to change the subject fairly soon, because I can't stand much more of that, because I think it's a lot of it's nonsense, I'm afraid, Christine, quite simply, bluntly spoken. Okay. And it's dangerous nonsense, because if people, on a purely practical level, we are being exploited by a monstrous elite at the moment, the new unhappy lords of the techno-feudalists and so on. And they, if they can't enslave us, they simply want to get rid of us. And they have more power than all the kings, all the emperors, all the tyrants of the past. And they're bearing down on us and our children and our future to absolutely wreck it. And if everyone is off chasing down their own little rabbit hole, their own particular spiritual experience and their own thing, we're utterly divided. The only thing that can possibly resist the utter, unbelievable evil of our elite is a united people. And whatever you might think, and individuals might think of, or perhaps we can go down the Adinic road or the Celtic road or the Set road or whatever, the vast majority of people of our society, when they're under pressure, will go back to Christianity. It always happens. Whenever there's a war, it's said that there are no atheists in a foxhole. Actually, there's no Odinists in a foxhole either. Everyone under fire but goes back to the faith of our ancestors. And in doing so, we get a communal unity, which is the only thing which will allow us to stand up to the oppression of our masters and to beat the swine. As for my cardboard box, I love parts of my cardboard box, but right now I'm facing a private prosecution by the Campaign Against Anti-Semitism, all of whom hate Jesus Christ and hate Christians, and they're trying to send me to prison for the fourth time. When, a previous time when I was threatened with prison, my wife had a miscarriage from the horror of it, from the shock, from the fear of it all, and so on. So, no, life's not exactly perfect in Nick Griffin's cardboard box, but it's a damn sight better because I've got Christian faith than if I was messing around with tarot cards and things which no one understands what is behind those things. But all the wisdom of our ancestors said, it's deep, it's dark, don't go there. And I have more faith in the wisdom, collective wisdom of my ancestors than I do in my ability as an individual mortal man to outthink them and go and do my own thing. That'd be monstrously arrogant, and I, for one, am not going there.
I hear what you're saying, but I think, it didn't really work for our ancestors. And I think currently, the world is in a mess. I do believe that, certainly the white race is going extinct. It needs to...
Because we won't have any children, because we won't follow what the Bible says to go forth and multiply. It's as simple as that. As for Christianity, go to any cathedral town near you. You can go to, for instance, Gloucester. As you drive towards Gloucester, you see two things: a magnificent cathedral and a multi-storey car park. Now, the multi-storey car park is there. It's a symbol of what's been created in a modern, post-Christian, godless, capitalist society. And you look at the cathedral, and if you think that there was something wrong with traditional Christianity, how come the most popular buildings in Britain and France and Germany are cathedrals? They're the pinnacle of the creative genius of our people, of the white man. And they came when the creative genius of our people and Christianity came together. You won't get any better than that. If you want to live in a world of pagan multi-storey car parks, that's entirely up to you. But I would suggest you're far better off in that place where the genius of our people and Christianity came together.
I just don't think it's offering anything new to us at the moment, and we're feeling
it doesn't offer anything new, Christine. We don't need anything new. We need
look at the mess in the world at the moment.
We need to resist the new, because the new that's coming our way is evil and horror and mass murder on an unbelievable scale.
Yes, isn't that why we should meet it with something new? Because look at, say, Crowborough, for instance. It's got those young men coming in. The whole of the village is really upset. It's a little twee village. Even if I went to live there, they'd probably look askance at me. So they have this insular little life. The way people do in villages. Strangers aren't welcome. People are shunned. This is the way the white race lives. So now it's backfiring on them. So Africans are moving there. And what about the poor Africans, how they feel? They've come from a traumatized place. They're coming somewhere new. And they're hated, and people look at them as rapists. I mean, how traumatizing is that for them? It's going to be awful. And I think Christianity has caused how we're living at the moment. We're not living in a good way. So you're saying new is coming at us. So don't we need something new to find a way forward? And I think we need a supernatural way forward rather than a physical way forward, because I think we're going blind. And what's going to happen, there probably will be some kind of civil war on the streets, which is going to be really nasty. Young women, everybody's going to get stabbed up. I mean, it's just going to be nasty. We need to find a new way.
You wouldn't have those evils if you had a people who actually just stuck to basic proper biblical teaching, because the Bible says, and the Christianity has always held traditional, that God created these different nations and appointed them and separated them, and that they should stay separate, that people shouldn't go wandering away from to other places. They should stay with their own people, that a government, people ruling, should look after and should put the people of their own house first, other than the worst of hypocrites, that there are very serious restrictions on how much you can do with money, because in the end, that's the worship of Mammon, the golden calf, and it will destroy you. And The problems in our world are nothing to do with Christianity, a great deal to do with the falling away from Christianity. I come back to abortion. The reason we have mass immigration, apart from the Marxists want it to destroy us and have a revolution, the capitalists want it for cheap labor and for profit. The political Judaists want it because they just hate white people and Christians and want to destroy us using Islam as the broom of mass immigration. But overall, the reason above all else we have mass immigration, the reason there's even room for Africans, including some of them being rapists in places like Crowborough, is because we've murdered 10 million British babies, as a result of which we're short, because they would have had children and some of them would have had children, we're short of at least 16 million Brits. If we weren't short of them, there would be no space in Britain for these immigrants. There'd be no talk of civil war with Muslims or black Africans coming in, because there simply wouldn't be room for them. Our country would be pleasantly full with our people. So you give up on Christianity, you give up on God, you disobey his laws to go forth and multiply, all sorts of horrors come down on you. And we've got those horrors coming down on us right now. And turning away even more from Christianity is only going to make them even worse. I'll tell you one thing in particular will make it worse, that you talk about the young people and so on, what's going to happen to them. Under the pressure that's coming, so just forget the supernatural stuff and so on for a minute, just the pressure of, say, AI destroying so many what would have been young graduate jobs, so and disrupting the economy and so on. Under the pressure that's coming, you already see very significant numbers of Generation Z turning back to religion, turning back to organized religion. The playing around with tarot cards and mumbo jumbo, that's something the boomers did when we were young. We played around with that. Young people now are turning back to organized religion. And there's only two organized religions. You can't become a Jew because they won't let you, because they think we're all subhuman, the ones who are really into the Talmud thing. So you can only become a Christian or a Muslim. That's it. So if you don't have Christianity, every white person, every person of Christian origin, such as yourself, who turns away from and helps to dismantle Christianity, is actually opening the door for the only alternative, that young people will become Muslims. Now, I don't want to see Britain as a Muslim country. I think that Islam suits very well to the Islamic countries. Fair enough. I know there's lots of Christians still work to change people's minds there and to turn them into Christians and so on. But overall, I think Islam suits their countries quite well. It doesn't suit our country. I don't want Britain to become a Muslim country. But every single person who, as I say, turns away from or in any way does down the Christian religion is making it more likely that more young people will become Muslims. In the end, that's your choice. You haven't got a choice of Christianity or paganism. You've got a choice of Christianity or Islam. And as a woman, well, I know which one I think you should pick.
Well, actually, interestingly, I did convert to Islam 2 years ago.
Oh, good Lord. But you gave up on that.
I didn't have anyone to pray with. I mean, I don't live near a mosque, so I didn't have anybody to teach me how to pray. But I know that Christianity and my local church, which was Catholic, wasn't giving me the supernatural connection that I craved.
Of course it wouldn't be. No, of course it wouldn't be, because it's a Vatican II semi-heretical church. Of course it wouldn't. When I'm talking about Christianity, you've got anyone listening to this who's thinking, well, feeling spiritual need is more and more people do. For heaven's sake, don't go to an Anglican church or a Vatican II Catholic church where they do the Mass in English, because they are not Christianity. They're a deliberate perversion of Christianity. You have to go to the Latin Mass. You have to go to a proper Calvinist church, or you have to go to an Orthodox church. Otherwise, you're not seeing Christianity at all.